Morning. How's everybody doing? Blessings to all the kings and queens out there putting in the grind. And really, what I wanted to focus on this morning is really shout outs to the parents that have children that are neurodivergent, that are trying to basically muscle through the day. And your efforts are definitely unnoticed, myself included. I have a child that, has deficiencies, and I hate to use that term, but really trying to muscle through her curriculum, putting together an IEP, expectations for the school setting, making sure that she has, the proper support, giving her the tools to, understand how to navigate this process, being able to contain some of the things that are distracting her, giving her the opportunity to taper and temper some of the behavior, focusing on that, providing that level of attention. Sometimes it's not necessarily available, right? So you have the parents that are leaning in, trying to figure out how to, provide a support system in the household. And then when you get to school, there are things that are not necessarily taken care of. We have specific instructions in terms of how to engage with her, what to do when she has a meltdown. Her diet is important, making sure she's hydrated. And then I pick her up, her thermos is full. She barely drank. And then I have another person that's actually transporting her out. It's not necessarily engaging with us, giving us that feedback to be able to know how to engage, transporting her from one into another therapy location midday. I have to make adjustments. My wife has to make adjustments. We're basically doing shifts, trying to, fill in the gaps as much as possible. And it's not sustainable. There's no way for us to do that. There's not a good support system available. We look for, caregivers that have those specific skill sets. Those aren't necessarily available. We're not able to have supplemental support in terms of insurance and coverage to offset some of the costs. So, we're having to make all these adjustments, make changes, and still try to figure out how to muscle through the day and be able to have that level of, stability. And I think that's important. So how do you try to have a good and positive outlook, when these things continue to happen? She's 10 now. We've gone through different providers. We've had her school setting changes, disrupts her flow. She needs consistency. She needs scheduling. She's gone through multiple administrators. And my child is a loving child. She doesn't necessarily act out, but there are steps to making sure that, there are things to make sure that she's engaged and she feels like she's valued, and just like everybody else, she fills in the gaps. And if she's not getting the proper attention, she'll act out.